Hi, and welcome back to the Agile Leadership Track. We're at Spring 1, 2020. Next up, we've got 18 months to migrate 800 applications, State Farm's transformation journey. And I've got Jeff, Matt, and Ryan as our presenters. Take it away, guys.
Hello, Spring One. I am Jeff Anderson, and I'm here with my colleagues Ryan Alberti and Matt Hubbard. And we're here to tell you about how we at State Farm migrated almost 800 applications from custom cloud to Tanzu application service. Now, I want to talk about us three presenters today. We've got three of us, each from different teams with different responsibilities with this migration. So we got Mr. Ryan Alberti. He's responsible for the installation maintenance of Tanzu application service, making sure that the platform has all the capabilities that our developers need. We've got Mr. Matt Hubbard. He is from a team that we call migration services that are responsible for ensuring that large-scale migrations are successful. And then yours truly, Jeff Anderson, I am responsible for our software developers understanding cloud-native architecture and applying those principles when they move to the latest and greatest platforms. So I'm sure you've heard of State Farm. We're really proud of State Farm's successes. We work really hard. Number one auto insurer in the U.S. since 1942. We're the number one homeowners insurer in the U.S. since 1964. Number 36 on Fortune 500. Employ a lot of folks, but you probably didn't know that we have approximately 1,800 software developers. And then with this particular migration, there was 146 teams of developers that were impacted. So what exactly did we do? What problem did we solve? What did we have to work with? Let's break it down. So while we were moving from old data centers to new ones, we had to install a new platform as a service in Tanzu application server. And we had to have 146 teams not only migrate their applications, but also do some refactoring. And we had 18 months to do it in. No sweat, right? So this infographic shows a lot of really good detail, a lot of good stats about the benefits that we got from this migration. So there was a lot of cost savings, a lot of infrastructure savings, a lot of developer time saved. And I won't point out every box or anything. You can kind of look at that off to the side. But I will point out that we started with almost 4,000 deployables, and we whittled that down to just over 700. So, overall, these savings, these were our motivations. We knew that we would get a lot of benefit from this migration, and we were successful with it. So how did we get started? So for this, I'll hand off to Mr. Ryan Alberti.
Thanks, Jeff. So really, from a platform perspective, it's kind of been a story about two clouds, this journey moving to Tanzu application service and making these massive improvements. The journey really had a lot of ups and downs. And so in hindsight, we thought it'd be really cool from a platform perspective to share both some of the things we think we did really well, we got right, and then also some of the challenges that we face with some recommendations of what, maybe how you can deal with that if you happen to run onto it too. So for perspective, the old, again, it was like a VM for every app instance. We had a lot of 30-minute plus deployments for our developer and product teams, and it took a lot of people to support the platform. As we moved to Tanzu, the new platform, obviously this is a container-based environment.
Oops. Sorry.
I'll wait for the slide to catch up here. Our deployment times decreased significantly, and we also inherited with Tanzu the open source ecosystem, which we really embrace and our product teams love as well. So our current size of our Tanzu footprint is 10 foundations across 3 different environments, and they're very large at about 315 XL Diego cells. So let's talk a little bit about what we did right. The first thing was to break down from a very customer-centric point of view all the use cases that we knew the customers would need. And so we started simple and then would add different layers into our use cases that we identified. And then, of course, alignment to leadership and resources is critical so that we could talk through strategies and guidance as we went through each one of those phases. Doing this kind of approach also really helped us identify who we needed to engage from another team. Obviously, as a platform provider, there's other pieces of the puzzle than just the runtime and the deployments with Tanzu. So this helped us identify when the timing was right to engage and engage early. In addition, it also gave our consumers, our customers, our product teams a real transparent roadmap. And even our leadership appreciated this so that they knew exactly where we were at any given time in the process and in the journey. And perhaps, just as important as saying where you are, saying what you're not doing very well or where there's some risk involved. Obviously, we had to take on consumers and product teams as we were building out the platform and it wasn't completed yet. So we also kept a wiki page in our internal wiki that demonstrated very specifically what risks product teams that were coming onto the platform were going to take on if they joined us in their earlier phases. Another thing I think we did really well was relied on the experts. VMware brought in dojos for us. We took advantage of several of those. And we also engaged product teams within the product suite of Tanzu to talk through different components, roadmaps to help us really plan and get ahead of things. And we even hired a couple consultants at different points to get us over hurdles where we really didn't have the internal skills to make those leaps in a short time frame. So let's talk about a little bit of our challenges and some recommendations I'd have for you. The first challenge is really about growth and scaling. When you have that many deployments coming in a very short amount of time, we had sometimes 30 to 50 application teams deploying overnight. And some of our alerting thresholds and other aspects would get stressed. So maybe the Doppler would be overran instantly overnight by the increased scale that we had. So I think if I had any recommendation in this space, it would be to be very present, know where you're at in that roadmap of onboarding people. And it's something that we've gotten much better with. And Matt will explain some of the processes we use now to have a much better schedule and controlled onboarding. The other thing we really struggled with was keeping pace with the change. Even with automation, it seemed painful at our size from time to time. And so we are developing best practices and how are we going to back up our services so that consumers won't even have to be involved as we make upgrades. It will happen transparently behind the scenes. And ultimately, I think we learned that repaving is much easier than backing up and recovering. And one last thing I think we often asked ourselves was, are we even getting this right? This is a super complex thing. We feel like we're constantly changing and growing and needing to do additional work. So what are other people doing? And I think this is something that really gave us a lot of confidence is talk to folks in user groups. There was a Tanzu, very large Cloud Foundry user group that we joined and we got a lot of benefit from. And then, of course, definitely join conferences and make connections to people there that are working on the same problems you are. The community is very open and helpful. And so now I think I'll pass it back to Jeff for the next part.
All right. Hey, Jeff Anderson again. And I wanted to tell you about how we helped dev teams get it done by the deadline. So at the onset of this migration, we knew that we wanted to stand up a product team that helped State Farm understand cloud native architecture. But then we also wanted to help with this big migration. So we formed a team of folks to do just that. So we knew that we needed a team that consisted of technologists that really understand cloud native architecture and continuous delivery, but also, and this is the key part, people that had to be really skilled and patient with coaching other people. In the background, you can see our team. We have a lot of fun. I love these folks. So first part, after we got the staff put together, is bringing the coaches up to speed. So, we wanted to define the goals, the things that we wanted to achieve through this migration. So sunsetting State Farm maintained custom frameworks was a big one. So sunsetting those in favor of more open source cloud native technologies and techniques was something that we wanted to do. We also wanted to achieve 100% automation from development to production via continuous delivery pipelines, and something that we mandated automated change process so that we cut down on delivery times by quite a bit. And then again, get 146 State Farm development teams to do this by a date. So with clear goals, next thing that we had to do is bring the coaches up to speed with the actual technology. So what we did was, we had to get some street cred. So we ended up partnering with some really good teams that were willing to kind of be our guinea pigs and work with us through migrating their apps from the old platform to Tanzu. And while we were doing that, we made note of all of the challenges and things that we learned, and that contributed to documentation that we called the cookbook, which was very helpful. So, Matt, Ryan, and I all have different products that we manage, but as we were working through enablement, we found that we all have different talents and could pitch in. So we did just that. So my team helped with some of the capability gaps that we were having with enabling the platform. So as I was trying to bring up the coaches up to speed with how the platform works, I figured, hey, what better way to educate my team about how the platform works than contribute to some of the enablement things. So we helped out with some network design issues, some credential management techniques, and then distributed logging and tracing are things that we helped out with. So in helping development teams, we figured it would be really good to have a set of online labs. So you can see in the background our actual labs that we put online for folks. So it was important to us that we had a mechanism for teams to go through some labs, do a tutorial to learn about how to deploy to the new platform. It was important to us also that these labs could be finished in about 30 minutes to an hour so that people could learn amongst some of the other things that they were doing in their busy day. So some folks learn better with an actual person there to help guide them. So we also made available workshops on a bunch of different topics around the new platform. So we set up workshops, more of a classroom style learning events that took about maybe an hour or 2 hours. We had over 250 people attend these on the topics that are shown there on the slide. So, we had labs, we had workshops. Ultimately, I think it was the dojo that really helped give the people the most lift. So our dojo is a wide space, open space. So you can see in the background of the picture here. We invited people down, development teams down for 2-3 weeks at a time. They brought their own applications, and us and our coaches helped get those teams to migrate their applications to get a jump start. So we had 65 teams come in the course of about 9 months. We also had open office hours. So once a week, we'd have people come in and ask questions of our coaches. 170 people came in for those. And then, and this is really key, we encouraged and facilitated the community. So we got teams talking to one another and said, hey, as you learn from us, pay it forward and help out some other teams. And you'll see that, we helped 65 teams in the dojo. There's 146 teams that were impacted. We firmly believe that that encouragement helped kind of spread the word throughout the department and get people the help that they needed kind of through each other. So next up is Matt Hubbard from Migration Services.
Thanks, Jeff. As Jeff said, I'm Matt Hubbard. I'm with the Migration Services team at State Farm. And migration services is a persistent team at State Farm. So this is one of the migrations that we work with. We are a dedicated team focused on a number of migrations at State Farm. So at any point in time, there are 8, 9, 10, 12 different migrations, sometimes more than that going on at once. For this particular effort, this was a large effort. We had 11 leads actually focused on splitting up those 146 teams. Each of those had a backup. There was additional support resources from our communications team, our leadership, our engineering team. And in this case, we also had 65 factory development resources that participated and in some cases actually made the coding changes and adjustments, at least through tests, for the teams that maybe were low on resources or fighting priorities with other work they had going on. We have a couple different migration types, and we try to classify them when we talk about the work we take on as a team at State Farm. There's cases where you're just introducing a new platform. Something new is coming along, right? In that mode, you're really helping people understand kind of what's there. You're maybe selling it a little bit. You may do some orchestrations for those who want to move. But generally, these tend to be open-ended and don't really tend to completely retire or get rid of anything else. So you end up probably in the end with multiple things active in production and moving. The focus and really what our team focuses on more is the sunsetting of existing platforms. So here, it's not just we're introducing something new, but we need to get rid of something. When we're done, we don't want two things to support. We don't want our consumers having to manage two different environments. So we've got a specific target date, and we have the desire to actually get rid of something when we're done. This is really the type of work, that we do focus on normally, but also really what we were talking about with this transformation journey, because as Ryan and Jeff said, we had an old platform that we had to get rid of that as part of getting out of our existing data centers. So there was definitely some hard dates and hard requirements around that. So real quick, let's just walk through the high level of what some of our migration process is, just to kind of give you an idea of how we break that down. Initially, or the first step, we really refer to as pre-assessment. This is a critical step in the overall success of migration. As we're gathering information, we're identifying the full scope of all those applications that have to change, all the teams that have to be contacted. We're identifying properties of those existing applications that impact complexity. So some applications may be very simple and it would be an easy transformation for them. Others, it may be much more difficult. So identifying those difficulties, those complexities up front are critical to the overall process. We work with platform team and technology owners on capabilities and impact. So the work Ryan talked about and Jeff talked about, were us partnering as a group and looking at that roadmap and what's needed. A lot of work went into that in order to make this successful. We identify migration patterns and overall approach, anything ultimately that could be automated or at least provide examples for to make it easier for people to consume the change is managed here. Next, we talk about assessment. And this is really where we start to share that information about the platform. We're getting out in front of folks, whether that's presentations, we call them lunch and learns at times, where we're sharing information. We get into individual meetings with every one of those product owners to assess what we know about their application, explain what's coming, explain the sort of changes that we see, and really identify what their need is for assistance, right? Establish the timelines on when they're going. And to Jeff's point earlier, we started with about 4,000 and some odd deployables. We're identifying duplicate, sunsetting, old version, things that just need to be cleaned up at this point as well, because again, that takes the work off for everybody. Post-assessment, we refer to development and test. Sometimes we'll call this the execution phase. This is really where the product teams are engaged with making the coding changes. They're getting their environments. They're going through the dojo and the education assistance stuff from Jeff's team. We're identifying any struggles with Ryan's team and the platform on capabilities that are coming online. But they're going through and actually making the work happen here. For migration services, this is our consulting time. This is also where that dojo our factory team is actually making changes for them. And again, we leverage the automation examples in this phase. Next step, we talk about really production, deployment, and cutover. So this is getting things out in the production environment, doing whatever validation and verification that can happen before a customer actually would see those new applications. So whatever we can do ahead of time to ensure success, We do that. And then ultimately, we're cutting over the consumer traffic. So user interfaces, that may be UIs, network changes, that may be routing changes for backend services. But this is where we're actually going live with these new applications deployed, in this case, on the Tanzu application server. And finally, clean up. So once we've got those applications cut over, one important thing that we do is we monitor the traffic on the retired platform. Oftentimes, there's some stragglers with traffic. There's folks or consumers that maybe people didn't know about, so we're still getting that traffic on the old platform. Ultimately, we have to make sure those are gone and managed, so then we can go into the coordinated cleanup of assets. Again, our goal in this case was actually to get an old platform out of a data center that was going away. So it was critical that we manage the cleanup process. So let's go through some lessons learned. So things that we just know, some of these were specific to this effort, and some of these are just general practices that we see in the migration space. Number one is lead with data. So any of these conversations we go into, whether it's with the platform teams in the planning phases, whether it's with the customers when we're actually planning their migration, the more information we have about their footprint, the numbers, the counts, the complexity, all of that information is critical to really do what that next lesson learned is, which is have leadership buy-in. You need to have numbers. You need to be able to scope the work, identify whether the dates you're targeting are actually realistic or not. The data drives that buy-in. And honestly, for something this size without that leadership buy-in, there's no way you're going to fight in the time frame we had that amount of work with other organizational priorities and things that are going on. One thing we've learned is app teams don't always know their apps very well. You will have very experienced teams that know them well. You will have other teams, especially an organization the size of State Farm, that have inherited that from somebody else and maybe haven't done a lot of maintenance if they're not real active applications. So again, the more data, the more knowledge we can bring to the table as we engage with those folks, the better that goes. Don't allow teams to wait to the last minute. So obviously in an 18-month effort, you can't have all the teams waiting for that last month. It just won't happen. So getting people scheduled over that time, getting out in front and finding the folks that can be aggressive with that is critical. Automate or provide examples where possible. So a lot of people work from examples better than just doc or guidance. And also anything that you can automate to make things go cleaner and quicker is certainly an advantage. Plan for cleanup of old. So one, we know cleanup typically takes longer than everybody thinks it will. So if you're not planning for that from the start and you have to get rid of things by a date, it's not just getting things on the new platform that's critical to that date, but it's definitely being prepared to actually clean up the old environments. Track and report status continuously. So if you don't know where you're at on an effort this size, there is no way to keep things on track and to know whether you're making progress and keeping up with the targets that have been set for you. So keeping track of where each one of those are at, any roadblocks or things that come up as they go through that process, it's just critical to keep track of that and report that continuously. And along with that, communicate well and often. So if you're not sharing where you're at, if you're not sharing the message, if you're not getting out in front of all levels of the organization with this sort of change, you will struggle. You will find folks that don't know what's going on or cause some rework and swirl. So communicating well and often is definitely critical through anything, certainly of this size. With that, that's really what we had to go through for you today. Hopefully this helps you with your large-scale migrations in the future. We will be in a Zoom session for questions here in a moment, so we'd be happy at that point to take questions and go into any other details you'd like. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff, Matt, and Ryan. Great to hear about the transformation. This is my favorite end of the business. We're closing in on just a couple more sessions. The next one is the Leader's Guide to DevOps Practice and Culture with Tiffany Joksha. We'll see you again in a few minutes.